How the foot should land on the ground in walking is a subject I've heard debated a number of times. Generally, there are two camps. First, there is the standard sort of model that says the heel should strike first. This is how most people walk and can easily be observed. The second camp says that the forefoot should hit the ground first. Often the argument is made that this is the more natural way to walk, as it is in a sense more careful. If you're walking barefoot, as a more natural person would, you don't want to slam your heel into the ground. Instead, you want to place your forefoot down first to feel out the ground. It's also argued that the heel strike that is so common is the result of people wearing shoes, especially bulky shoes with a cushioned heel. These shoes will make articulation of the foot more difficult and blunt the impact of the heel hitting the ground. This is, however, disputed, as others say that even in societies where no one wears shoes, people still strike with their heel first. From Masoero's perspective, you want to land over the instep of the foot. The instep is the point we've defined on the talus bone, just in front of the ankle. In practice, this essentially means that the foot will be horizontal when it lands, meaning that the toes will not be elevated as in the heel strike, and nor will the heel be elevated. The entire foot will hit the ground. But for Masoero, how exactly the foot lands is not as important as where the foot lands in relation to the torso. As we've seen, typical walking with a heel strike causes the foot to land well forward of the body. When the foot strikes like this, it produces a force that pushes backwards. That doesn't really make sense if we want to walk forward. With each step, we will be causing a force that pushes back against our forward progress. So today we're going to come back to an idea we briefly looked at in my video, A New Conception of Walking, which is the idea of the strong leg and the weak leg. This is a concept that Francois Delsarte used, and there is a specific technical definition of the strong and weak leg. A leg is considered strong if it is in line with the frontal plane. A leg is considered weak if it's forward or backward relative to the frontal plane. The frontal plane is the plane on which we want to line up the upper sternum, lower sternum, eighth ribs, iliacs, and insteps. Masoero says we want to walk in such a way that our front leg becomes our strong leg. This is obviously different from typical walking, where the front leg is brought forward of the torso and the legs are very spread apart front to back. How can we hope to truly walk tall if our legs are split like this? By making the front leg land in such a way that it is in line with our frontal plane, we will land at our full standing height. We will not be shrinking to walk. We will be landing right where we need to go up on the toes again and take the next step. Unlike in typical walking, where we must overcome the backward force of the heel strike, we are landing in a way that encourages us to continue forward and up. To make sure we don't get our leg forward of our body, we need to use the concept we've looked at before, of moving the torso first and allowing the leg to catch up and become our strong leg. This way we can land on an extended leg with a lengthened torso. To come back to the argument of how the foot should land, obviously I disagree with both major camps and would recommend landing over the instep near the middle of the foot. But I think this idea of making sure the front leg becomes the strong leg is something to consider before worrying about exactly how your foot hits the ground. I also think it's a highly actionable idea. While visual feedback from a camera is always helpful, you should be able to tell if you're landing with your leg in line with your frontal plane. You can even look down and check. If you make it your intention, I think most will succeed at this, or at least greatly improve over their starting point. Another idea we can add in here is that we want to keep the sole of our foot as low to the ground as possible. This will help us keep our leg extended as we swing it. You may find this feels wrong, that there's a bit of fear that your foot will scrape on the ground and potentially trip you up. But if you're going up on your toes to walk, you should find that you do not in fact scrape your feet. Try it out and see. It might feel strange at first to not overly lift the toes as most people do. Once you've tried out those ideas, I have one more procedure you can experiment with. The idea is this: can you walk without bending your knee at all? You can imagine that you have a cast over your knee that makes it impossible to bend. When Jondo Masoero first showed me this procedure, he joked that it would be best to really put a cast on the knee. I'm not going to explain this procedure now. We'll follow up in the next episode. But if you do experiment with this, try to figure out what this changes about how you walk. It's going to feel a bit stiff and awkward at first, but if you come back to the various concepts we've looked at in this series, you might find something interesting when you play with this idea. Use a mirror or record yourself with a webcam or camera if you really want to see what's happening. Experiment a bit with the ideas I've presented here today. Then join me next episode, and we'll look at what straightening the legs does and explore some more ways to get the legs in a good condition for walking.